if you define entrepreneurship as taking a risk to create something out of nothing, that would be an acceptable definition. An entrepreneur is somebody who takes a risk to create something out of nothing. That makes, in my opinion, God the great entrepreneur, because the Bible says, in the beginning, God. The unmoved mover, the creator of all things. Before anything existed, God was. And he spoke, and creation came into being. And then he did a really crazy thing. And he created us, and he put us in charge of everything he created. And that was a big risk. And sometimes that risk is paid for him, and sometimes it doesn't. It really depends on what day we're having, doesn't it, really? But God is the greatest entrepreneur. He took a massive risk to put humankind in charge of creation, which he brought out of nothing.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Guild Faith. Here we want to help and inspire entrepreneurs and business people to integrate their faith in their business, because we want to see this nation transformed, and we want to see other emerging markets transformed by people that integrate their faith in their vocation and take the responsibility to be ambassadors of Christ there in their field. Today, I'm very privileged to have Matt Bird here in Romania with us. So Matt is an entrepreneur. He's also an author. He loves to have social impact, and he's also a public speaker. He wrote like 19 books. And Matt loves to help people and help them to understand the value of business and enterprise. And he wants to see cities, nations transformed by enterprise. Matt founded more initiatives, and by Neighbor, he's helping the local churches be an inspiration for the local communities and to help transform. Also, he has Relationology, where he helps business people grow based on the relation and the trusted relations that they do with each other. And also, Matt is involved in many other initiatives, tourism in Italy, but he will tell us more. Matt, welcome in Romania.
Rupert, it's great to be with you and all your community of listeners and friends today.
Matt, tell us a little bit about your professional career. How did you arrive in this point to be involved in all these initiatives?
Oh my goodness. Well, you need to know I was... my school and I were not best friends. I really struggled at school.
We have something in common already.
So, for me, I didn't find school easy. I didn't find working out my career easy. And I've always been a person that said that if the door of opportunity isn't knocking, make a door. So if you can't find the job you want, make the job you want. And so I've always had this kind of grit and this spirit of, let's make it happen. Let's do it. And so, over the years, I've started lots of things. I'm a serial parallel business and social entrepreneur. I've got 4 or 5 ventures at the moment. I just love starting things, building things, finding partners to work with me, building teams. That's what gives me a buzz.
When was it when you realized that you were attracted to this entrepreneurship and enterprise?
Gosh.
Was it some moment in your life?
Yeah, it was actually during the pandemic that I finally accepted I was an entrepreneur. I remember my first entrepreneurial experience, actually. It was at school. I didn't do well in the classroom, but out of the classroom I did okay. In the classroom they put me in remedial English class, remedial maths class. They told me I couldn't do computer studies because my grasp of the English language wasn't good enough. I left school believing I was stupid because that's what my teachers told me I was. So, it wasn't great. But one of the things I do remember from school, interestingly, my school had just invited me back to speak to the students. So I've got to think carefully about what I might say. But one of the things I remember from school is I grew up in a family who didn't have much money. And my packed lunch, I always resented the fact that my packed lunch, whilst it had a sandwich, unlike the other kids, it never had a bag of crisps because my parents couldn't afford to buy crisps. They thought it was a bit of a luxury. And so I always everybody opened up their packed lunch at lunchtime, and I felt where's my crisps? But my father did work for a business that ran a confectionery line. So he used to go to the staff shop and buy a big box of chocolate bars, for very cheaply. And so whilst my packed lunch didn't have a packet of crisps, it always had a bar of chocolate. Now, one lunchtime, I opened my packed lunch, and Barney, the most popular boy in the class, said, "Hey Matt, I'll buy that chocolate bar off you." And immediately I said, "Yeah, of course." So he really enjoyed it. He said, "Can you bring some more tomorrow?" So I bought a handful of chocolate bars the following day. Because Barney was this really popular kid, if Barney bought my chocolate, guess what? All the kids wanted to buy my chocolate. So before I knew it, I was taking a whole box of chocolate bars into school every day and selling them out my sports bag in 5 minutes. And that's when that was my first recollection now of being entrepreneurial. And many of the kids in my class did paper rounds in the early hours of the morning. But I made more in one day than they did doing the paper round all week. So that, as I look back, that's when I first thought, actually, that was really entrepreneurial. But it wasn't until the pandemic that I accepted the fact that I'm an entrepreneur.
Wow, thank you for sharing with us, Matt. It's amazing how challenging and challenge can become an opportunity, and the entrepreneur there sees. And yeah, even if the circumstances are not great, but we create them.
Yeah, we do. That's what it's all about. And I think that's what the pandemic did. In the pandemic, it was sink or swim. Mm-hmm. So much in our world's changed. And in the pandemic, I thought, well, I'm not going to sink, so I'm going to learn to swim. So a number of things happened, but basically I said, "Matt, actually you're very enterprising.
Yes.
And you're an entrepreneur. Accept the name." And I always resisted calling myself an entrepreneur because I thought an entrepreneur needed to have created something big and made loads of money. And I'd never created anything big at that point or made loads of money. But I thought, actually, I am an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And so just that kind of changed my mindset. From a poverty mentality to a belief that anything was possible.
Wow.
And I said, I'm an entrepreneur. And that's where my serial parallel enterprising ventures all started tripping off big time.
That's amazing. And Matt, how did you get connected with Romania? Have you been here before? What's your connection with Romania?
Yeah, well, years ago I was part of a church in London. And I met a guy called SP Mahoney. And he's here in the room now. You can't hear him or see him, but he's here. And he loves Romania and has lived here before and is living here again. And he invited me to come out and hang out and discover some of the people and places. And so that's how I come.
What was your first impressions about Romania? I'm curious, how through your eyes, how it looked.
Well, one of the things we did, we drove through Transylvania, and it was obviously it's beautiful. I was stunned by the beauty, of the land, and then obviously getting to know the people, and just warmth and welcome. And I find people around the world fascinating. I love meeting new people and learning from them, and I've loved discovering more of Romania. And like I do in any city I go to, I love picking out some of the best restaurants and some of the great places to go. I've already found my local hotel. I stay out in the local coffee shop, and I went off there this morning and I got my coffee and my little pastry. So I feel very much at home.
Wow, that's wonderful. Also, King Charles has some properties here in Romania, and he says that it reminds him of, I don't know, maybe the grandparents or something like this. There was some connection between the royal families in Romania and UK, and now they have these jokes that in the city, actually it's a small village where he has this house, the neighbors talk together and say, "Do you know that the owner of this house became the king of the United Kingdom?"
It's a claim to fame, isn't it? Yeah. My neighbour.
Yeah, my neighbour.
Do you know who my neighbour is?
Matt, you're also an author, and you wrote all these nice books. Please tell us a little bit about the book we have here, the one of the newest books, The Great Entrepreneur. Yeah.
This just published just a few weeks ago. And The Great Entrepreneur, well,
who is the great entrepreneur?
If you define entrepreneurship as taking a risk to create something out of nothing, that would be an acceptable definition. Mm-hmm. An entrepreneur is somebody who takes a risk to create something out of nothing. That makes, in my opinion, God the great entrepreneur. Because the Bible says, in the beginning, God. The unmoved mover, the creator of all things. Before anything existed, God was. And he spoke, and creation came into being. And then he did a really crazy thing. And he created us, and he put us in charge of everything he created. And that was a big risk.
Very big.
And sometimes that risk is paid for him, and sometimes it doesn't. It really depends on what day we're having, doesn't it? Really. But God is the greatest entrepreneur. He took a massive risk to put humankind in charge of creation, which he brought out of nothing. And so this book is all about us developing a biblical theology to understand that God is an entrepreneur. And the two things we discover about God in Genesis chapter 1 is that God is plural, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We see the reflection of that. In the beginning, God, his Spirit hovered over the water, and he spoke his word, and it came into being. So we see the reflection of the Trinity begin to emerge. And in the Trinity, we understand that God is love, because the Father loves the Son loves the Father and the Son send the Spirit into the world, etc. So God exists as a community of love, and we're created in his image to live in community. So we only flourish and thrive in community and in loving relationships with other people, whether you accept Christ or not. Fact. Businesses only flourish and thrive when there are healthy, positive relationships. Where relationships break down, businesses struggle and fail. I mean, forgetting whether anybody confesses Christ in the business, it's just a fact. The other thing we learn from Genesis chapter 1 is that God is the creator, that God created all things out of nothing, that he is an entrepreneur, that he is productive, fruitful, innovative, and that we are not only created in the image of God, which makes us loving and born for relationships and community, but we are created in the image of an entrepreneurial God. So guess what? We all have the spirit of enterprise within us. And so in the book, The Great Entrepreneur, I unpack this. My view is that weak theology, biblical theology, is based upon an isolated biblical verse. And I can think of a number of mainstream, mostly North American Christian thinking that is a big in the church, but actually it's based upon an isolated biblical verse. Strong theology, however, is based upon a biblical theme that follows from the beginning of the Bible all the way through to the end. And the fact that God is an entrepreneur is actually not based upon a Bible verse in isolation, but it's based upon a biblical theme. So this book, The Great Entrepreneur, does a biblical survey looking at how throughout the Bible who God is and what God does is enterprising. Now I know that's new language and new thinking, but it's a fundamental biblical theme. And so in this book I'm trying to help people understand that and to awaken to the fact that not only is business good and godly, but actually creating business or entrepreneurship is good and godly. So that's part of what the book's about.
Wow, thank you, Matt. Thank you so much. We are looking forward to read the book.
And if you speak French, you can buy it in French, but it's in English here on the table.
I hope we will have it in Romanian too soon. So thank you so much.
That would be great
for sharing with us. Actually, this is very interesting, and it's a new approach. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about the role of business and entrepreneurship, especially in a country like Romania, where we didn't have this. We're coming from communism, where we didn't have private enterprise, and how can we put things together, like entrepreneurship and calling and faith? How can we put them together?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if God is an entrepreneur, if we're entrepreneurial, we're following God. Now, let me just a few examples. My mother was one of the most enterprising people I've ever met.
Wow.
We didn't have a lot as a family, But she took what we had and she made it work. She put a meal on the table every day. She made me a packed lunch, even without a packet of crisps. She saved up and enabled me to go on the youth group summer holiday. She saved money out of the housekeeping every week to enable me to do that. She was an incredibly enterprising woman. And people express entrepreneurship in different ways. And I think parents have to be phenomenally enterprising. So I just want to put it in context. In one corner you've got enterprising parenting. In another corner you've got, as I came from the airport yesterday into the city centre here, I saw a sign on the roundabout, and a friend of mine, built that. It's for a business, and a friend of mine owns it's listed on the New York Stock Exchange now. He owns a lot of shares in that business, and he built that business and built that business in some places and in some countries to create employment for thousands of people. So he is also enterprising and reflecting the fact that the God he follows is an entrepreneur. I think even pastors can be enterprising, pastorpreneurs. Basically, to start a church from scratch is entrepreneurial. Is it not?
Of course.
To start with nothing and gather a small team of people around you and to build a community of faith that has a transforming impact in its community and its city. This is entrepreneurial. I call them pastorpreneurs. So you've got enterprising parenting. You've got entrepreneurs who build big business. You've got solopreneurs. Who go out there alone and work freelance. And make life work. So there are lots of models of being an entrepreneur. That's what I wanted to give some concrete examples of that. So as you're listening, don't think, oh, I'm not an entrepreneur. Because you have the spirit of enterprise within you. Never say, I'm not creative or I'm not very creative, because you're lying to yourself, because you're created in the image of the Creator. So you are creative. Never, ever, ever say, I'm not a very creative person. We all express creativity and we all express enterprise in different ways.
Wow. Thank you so much, Matt. This is very enlightening, and it helps us to have a more clear understanding about entrepreneurship. And how do you think a business should be different if it's led by a Christ-following entrepreneur then?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. A Jesus business is not a Jesus business because it has a fish sign on the back of its van or on its letterhead. Please, let's remove the fish signs from the back of vans and letterheads and all that stuff. It's just so that does not make it a Jesus business. What does make it a Jesus business for me is its motivation. Why does it exist? What's the purpose? What is the purpose of business? And pastors, the purpose of business is not so these people can earn more money to give the church. Is not so people in business can drag people to church from their staff team and make them attend and hope they come to Christ. That is not the purpose of business. Business people are not necessarily evangelists, and they are not there to be the biggest givers in your church. Their primary purpose is to create jobs, to create value, to pay taxes, to create economic growth. There are many charities that claim to end poverty or to be working towards ending poverty. The fact is, no charity will ever end poverty. It's not possible. Because no amount of money you raise can run enough welfare programs and give away enough of anything to ever end poverty. Similarly, government cannot end poverty. Government are not able to end the cost of living crisis. Now, wherever I travel in the world, everyone is struggling with the cost of living crisis. The government can't fix it. It's not its job to fix it. The government can create an environment for the cost of living crisis to be fixed, but it can't fix it. The only solution to poverty, financial hardship, and the cost of living crisis is enterprise. The purpose of enterprise and business is to create value and to create jobs. Only jobs can permanently lift people and families and communities out of poverty. Last time I was here in Romania, SP and I went to see a friend of ours, Dan, and he'd started a business in a village, small village, and they were employing 5 or 6 people, and they were making furniture. In fact, it was Dan who introduced us, wasn't it?
Yes.
That business was making furniture, good value furniture that people valued and therefore paid money for, but it was creating these jobs that were beginning to transform the lives of families and transform the life of the village. I mean, business is the most powerful agent of change and transformation. Charity will never end poverty. Government will never end poverty. But business can end poverty and bring about transformation.
Wow, I love this with transformation by business. It's very encouraging. And Matt, what do you think are the key ingredients for an ecosystem? Because you said about an environment of enterprise and to encourage enterprise. What would be the important elements of an ecosystem, of an environment where enterprise is encouraged, where entrepreneurs get support, where they can grow?
Yeah.
Because we are very interested about this in Romania, in Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
We need much more enterprise and entrepreneurship, but we don't know exactly how to stimulate that.
I mean, at the beginning, you partly introduced me by saying I lead a global foundation called Neighbour. And Neighbour helps local churches to transform their communities. And one of the ways we do that is to enable local churches to help people start businesses. Yes, you heard it. Churches helping people to start business, because a food parcel is not going to end poverty for that person. It will feed them for a few days. There's that proverb, isn't there? They say, give a person a fish and it will feed them for a day. Teach them to fish and it will feed them for life. So churches, we can give food parcels to people, but it feeds them for a day or a few days. What if churches could help people start businesses to feed them for life, lasting, sustainable change? So Neighbour, my foundation, we help churches do that, and we help churches create an ecosystem, come back to your question, where enterprise can flourish and thrive. And I think there's a number of dimensions to it. One is, for me, is about community. Leadership is lonely. Entrepreneurship can be very, very lonely. So one of the most important things in any enterprise ecosystem is to create a place where entrepreneurs can connect, build relationships and build community. So we can support one another, encourage one another, challenge one another, push each other forwards, pick each other up. We need relationships and community. That's a key part of any enterprise ecosystem. So firstly, community. Secondly, we need capital. Money is required to start a business and to grow a business. And there are stages in the development of any business where it needs a cash injection. Sometimes that can be simply from profits, but sometimes you need to go for private funding, go to the markets, whatever it is, but you need capital. So one of the things that Neighbour encourages churches to do, and this may sound crazy, but we encourage churches to give enterprise grants to people starting a business. Maybe what they need is a computer or a deposit for a van or some gardening equipment if there's a gardening business, whatever it may be. There's that little bit of cash you need right at the beginning to get the ball rolling. And churches can give an enterprise grant, no strings attached, not expecting it back, but just to seed the start of a new business. So, firstly, entrepreneurs need community. Secondly, entrepreneurs need capital. Thirdly, and it needs to be another C, doesn't it, really? Community, capital. I think they need coaching. Coaching. We, as entrepreneurs, it's so helpful to journey with somebody who's been where we want to go, who's been there before, who can give us advice, counsel, be a sounding board, be a mentor. You can go it alone, of course you can. We're all big people, but you're going to fail more if you go it alone. What if you lead your enterprise, with the benefit of one or two people around you who are seasoned business people, who are entrepreneurs, who have done it before, so you can learn from them and their mistakes and save yourself a stack of mistakes. So I think these are three ingredients in an enterprise ecosystem. Community, we need one another, we need a peer group, we need capital, we need access to cash at different levels, at different stages, and we need coaching. We need people that have been there before to mentor us and coach us along the way. So Neighbour inspires churches to actually start enterprise hubs. Well, this is another C, where people can co-work together, where they can find community, where they can find coaching, and where they can find cash. Most churches have got a building. They don't use Monday to Sunday, every day of the week, Monday to Friday. Well, why not use a part of the building as an enterprise hub, create some co-working space where entrepreneurs can come in and hot desk and work together in the same space? Now, isn't that a thought?
Matt, I love your vision. My question is, how do you convince local churches to make this shift? Because this is completely different from what they imagine that we do in a local church. And especially in Romania, we're coming from a culture where some things are sacred, others divine. So there's this separation between things. And doing hubs of innovation in local churches is really crazy.
It's a big step, isn't it? Yeah. There's a church in Birmingham in the UK who have gone one step further. They bought a building to run as an enterprise hub. Mm-hmm. It's got 30 small rooms, and they're going to have 30 enterprises they're going to support in the early stages of their launch and growth. In this building, it's run by the church. And I know that, no, I'm not saying every church should buy a building, but I'm just saying you don't need to buy a building. You've probably got a room or a space that you can multi-purpose Monday to Friday to create some enterprise space. But coming back to my earlier point, there's no. Well, I didn't make this point earlier, but implicitly, there's no sacred secular divide. A pastor or a worship leader is in no way doing more sacred work than an accountant, a lawyer, a teacher, a doctor, a nurse, a gardener, a dustbin collector, a bus driver. All the Bible tells us. Whatever we do, we work at it with all our heart as if for God and not for people. Every occupation is actually sacred because a Christ follower is doing it. So if you're listening, just never, ever, ever call your work secular. There is no such thing as secular. In fact, the only thing that's secular is sin. And if it's sin, let's call it sin. Let's not call it secular. You make your work sacred as a follower of Jesus and a worshipper of him. So we must break down this sacred secular divide. There shouldn't be a division between, or a hierarchy even, of what we think is more sacred than anything else. And that's why, for me, I'm a preacher. I preach in churches around the world. I run a global foundation, helping churches love their communities better. I also run a publishing company, a property company, a personal development company, and I see no difference between them in terms of the values and the motivation, because Jesus inspired me to start each of them, and I walk with him in each of them. And I try and make a difference for him in each of them.
Wow, that's very encouraging. And for us in Romania, this is one of the challenges that we have in mindset: this separation and this division. Yeah. And there are also others. For example, we come what we see around from a limited mindset. Maybe because we had some traumas in the past, in the communist time, and there were lack of resources. And we have this mindset that if you win, that means I have to lose. So it's like a limited game. Yeah. And my question is, how can we change the culture? How can we transform the culture around us?
Yeah.
Change the mindsets.
Yeah. I mean, I know you can because I've done it.
Mm-hmm.
In the pandemic, I decided I was an entrepreneur. Prior to that, I thought I was just... I ran some non-profits. I started non-profits. I ran charities. I started churches.
How did you overcome the fear that maybe you will fail? Maybe what the people will say if you fail, and what will be their impression about you?
I'm not really bothered what people think of me. I know God loves me, and I know God likes me. So, yeah, I don't want to offend people, but I don't need other people's approval. What created the shift? For me, it was biblical understanding. during because I was preaching a lot around the world, in the pandemic for a couple of years, I was grounded. I wasn't flying anywhere, and I missed preaching. So what did I do? I started my own little Sunday morning thing, where just short 15 minutes where I sat on my sofa, got a little tripod. I just did it from my mobile phone. It's pretty high quality nowadays. And I just did a little live every Sunday morning for 15 minutes. And I did a series called A Lot with a Little. And I looked at the Bible and all the examples, and I did it over 12 weeks, and I picked 12 examples of where God took a little and did a lot with it. Whether it was the widow whose sons were about to be taken from her because the debt that her late husband had left her with. And then Elisha the prophet turns up and says, "What do you got?" "I've got a jar of oil." "Why don't you go and collect loads of other empty jars from the neighbours?" Off she goes. And he said, "Not just a few." I love that phrase. Yeah, don't have a low expectation of what God's going to do here. So she goes off, collects all these jars. She pours the oil, following his instructions, into all the jars. She fills all the jars. And then the prophet says to her, "Go and sell them. And sell enough to pay off all the debts. And then what you have left, you and your sons can live on." Now, when I say God's an entrepreneur and God is enterprising, I think it's a pretty amazing example of God taking a little and doing a lot with it. I mean, it's phenomenal. But throughout the Bible, there are these stories. I mean, the 5,000 men listening to Jesus, there are probably other women and children there as well. So lots of people. And they've got no food. 5 loaves, 2 fishes. Now, tell me the maths. How does 5 loaves and 2... In fact, there was 5 small loaves and 5... there were small loaves and fishes. And tell me the maths. How does that turn into 12 baskets afterwards? It doesn't add up. Because God is an entrepreneur. God is a multiplier. God takes a little and he does a lot with it. So as you're listening now, think about... It's easy to think what you don't have. Mm-hmm. That's part of the poverty mentality. You're fixated with what you don't have. But when your mindset shifts, you focus on what you do have. What has God already entrusted to you? And how do you take that and do a lot with it? So I did this series, 12 biblical accounts where God took a little and made a lot out of it. And just during that series, I just felt challenged that God is an entrepreneur. And that's the thing that inspired me to buy this property in Italy, because I didn't have a pension. I've been doing pioneering kingdom work all my life. I had no pension. And I thought, what can I do? I'm 50-something. And I've got another birthday this year. I'll be 50-something plus 1. I thought, what do I do? And so I just, an opportunity came up to buy a property. I didn't have the money. I went to an institution. Of course, institutions always say no when you want to borrow money. They only want to lend you money when you don't need it, and they can make lots of money from you. But there are other ways to find capital. So I found other ways to find capital, and I bought this place and done. So so I was inspired through an understanding in the Bible that God is an entrepreneur, and what God does is entrepreneurial. I mean, I started another business in lockdown. Because I've written books. People have always come to me for help with books. And I thought, gosh, this is becoming a bit of a nuisance. Can I make my... Now, I didn't do this on purpose. I just thought, how can I make life easier for myself? I thought, well, what if instead of helping people individually, I wrote a course about how to write a book? And I help people as groups. So I launched a course. 2 years later, I'm coaching over 100 people a year to become published authors. We now actually run a publishing house. We're now publishing 4 books a month. The people who do my course, it's 100 days, 8 sessions over the 100 days. 8 out of 10 people finish the course with a manuscript. So this little thing that I initially did for my own convenience, because I thought it'd be easier to coach people in a course, actually turned out to be part of its power. Because actually writing on your own is really isolating. But writing in a community, you've got encouragement, support, accountability, challenge. So now the business is called Publish You, the letter U, publishyou.com. And I'm coaching people all around the world. I believe everybody's got a book in them. Everybody has a book in them. You've got a story to tell or a message you want to communicate. You have a story in you. And if remedial boy Matt Bird, who was put in remedial English classes at school, he was told he couldn't do computer studies because his English wasn't good enough, who later discovered he was dyslexic. If I can write a book, anybody can write a book.
Wow.
And I've created this unique step-by-step process through which I coach people to write the book within them. So that's Publish You. So that's another business I started in the lockdown. But not all my businesses succeed, but I like to talk about the ones that do mostly.
Matt, and how do you manage them? Because for an entrepreneur, they see opportunities. They see in challenges. They see opportunities. They have ideas. They are creative. They want to start. But then managing starts to happen. Okay, how do I do this? And I have this. And you also have some things on your plate, like businesses and organization. How do you manage all this, or how do you prioritize? Because this is a challenge for most of the entrepreneurs that start, and then if it's becoming successful or it has some traction, then they become overloaded, and many go in burnout. They don't know how to manage. This is a big challenge for entrepreneurs. How do you do them, or what is your advice?
My advice is get yourself a business partner or partners. Mm-hmm. And this started in lockdown as well, I now don't do anything without a business partner. So in every venture I have somebody who works with me. And I'm not saying team, I'm saying business partner.
Wow.
Because when you work on your own, when things go wrong, guess who ends up carrying the can? You carry the can. But if you're in a partnership with others, you jointly, when things go wrong, you jointly carry the load of it. And when things, and together, actually, 2 is always better than 1 and 3 is always better than 2. It's just the creativity and the ideas. So for me, having business partners, firstly. Secondly, building a team. So partners and team are not the same thing. Having people work for you is not the same as having a partner. Mm-hmm. People who work for you as part of a team, if it all goes wrong, you won't see them for dust. Business partners, it all goes wrong, they'll be standing there. You'll be standing there together, and that's what you need. So for me, I have a business partner or business partners in every venture that I do. Secondly, I always build a team because I'm good at some things, but I'm not good at everything by any means. So I always try and find people who are really good at things I need doing, and you don't have to employ them. Don't rush to employment. Use them as freelancers, subcontract to them. Give them a profit share. There's lots of ways to build a team without having to put them on the payroll. So when you launch a business, you want to control your costs. Don't get a building. Buildings just not for most ventures. It's not necessary. You don't need an office. Work from your kitchen table. You don't need to employ people. Share a profit margin with people. Bring them on as freelancers. Pay them a day rate. So all these things are really important for me. Business partners, build team, and manage your cash. And because in any business, cash flow is everything. So you don't do anything that doesn't make money. You make a margin on everything. These are just really important principles for me in running a business. So that's how I come back to your question. That's how I manage to run lots of businesses. I have business partners, and I have team, and I manage cash flow.
Thank you for sharing with us, Matt. Let's talk a little bit about the importance of relations in business. If business it's based on trust. What do you think is the importance of relationships in business, and how can we grow them? How can we encourage them?
So for me, relationships are everything. As I said earlier, God is relationship, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We're made in His image. If God is plural, we're made for plurality. We will only flourish and thrive in relationships and community with other people. So if I go to a big business, big professional services firm, I know that team will never flourish and thrive unless it builds really good relationships. So how do you build good relationships? Well, I've written a book on the subject, several books on the subject, and I run a business about relationships, helping them build relationships. No surprise, because your understanding and what you're good at, you have to monetize it. You can take it and turn it into a value proposition that others can benefit from. So for me, relationships, I've been passionate about relationships for many years. I was invited to a business conference to speak on the subject of networking. Mm-hmm. Now, I received the invitation, and I'm always delighted to receive an invitation to speak, but my stomach turned when I read that the subject was networking. I hate networking, despise networking. I find it contrived, disingenuous, manipulative. I could write a book on what I don't like about networking. And I told the organizer, and he said, "But Matt, you're really into relationships." I said, "Yeah, but networking and relationships aren't necessarily the same thing." I said, "I believe in we should stop networking and that we should start relationships. Networking is all about what you can get out of a person, and you'll stick to them while they can get something from them. Relationships, it's about actually how you can grow through the relationship and how you can give in the relationship." So I've written a book called Relationology, 101 Secrets to Grow Your Business Through the Power of Relationships, where it talks about collecting, keeping and growing relationships. And so for me, any successful entrepreneur or business leader, the quality of their business will be determined by the quality of their relationships, and how we collect relationships with team members, with clients and customers, with stakeholders, how we keep those relationships healthy, because things go wrong in relationships. So we need to know what do you do when it goes wrong. And then how do you grow those relationships over the long term? So how do you collect, keep and grow relationships? I'm passionate about how relationships make business work. The fastest, simplest and easiest way to get anything done, you know this, Ruben, is through a relationship.
Yeah.
When you need to solve
Who do
a
you
problem, yeah, when I've got a problem to solve, who do you know?
Who do you know?
Who do you know?
And then let's go to the team, to our teams. As entrepreneurs, we have this passion and we have this vision, and we want to see also things accomplished. We want to see progress. And
Yes.
How do you see this tension between objectives and getting things done and loving your people in your team? How do you see this manage and this tension?
Yeah. Well, people need to know you love them. Now, it may sound a bit of a strong word.
Also in business?
It may sound a strong word in a business environment, but it's the same in business. People need to know you matter. They matter to you. They really need to know you matter to you. So I always say, there are some people that you only ever hear from when they want something from you, aren't there? And it's kind of like, oh, it's because you want something. And I try not to be that person that only contacts people when I want something, but tries to build genuine relationships with the person, to actually know them, know personal things about them, to actually show I care about you and not just what you can do for me. Whether you're a client or whether you're a colleague, I want to know you, and I want to know about you personally, because I'm for you. And if you want to get discretionary effort out of people, they have to feel that you're for them and not just what they can do for you. And for me, that is the most important thing in building a team. I don't say I always get it right, but that I know is the most important principle in building relationships.
Wow. Yeah, we cannot do business alone. So
No. I mean, it's after tonight's gig, it's why we're going out for dinner, isn't
Exactly.
it? No transactions, just go and hang out. Because when you build relationships with people, it creates the opportunity for God's Spirit to work. If you sit at home and watch Netflix every night, you're not going to meet anybody, you're not going to build relationships, and you're limiting what God can do in your life. One of the most important things you can do is to get out there and meet people. Not network, but go out there and genuinely meet people. Invest in relationships. It is the most valuable asset you have in your life. A friend was trying to encourage me recently. He said, "Matt, you're a multi-millionaire." He said, "Your relationship network alone is worth X million, and this is worth that." And I just thought,
Okay.
yeah, it is actually. It's relationships are an appreciating asset. You buy a car or a boat or a plane, it's a depreciating asset. But you invest in people, and over a lifetime, those relationships become more and more valuable and more important. You've known somebody for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. I mean, wow, that is so valuable and so powerful, because God can work through those relationships of high trust and high authenticity and do the things he wants to do.
Matt, how do you measure your success? And how do you think an entrepreneur should measure their success?
That's a really good question. On my 40th birthday, I went away and took a retreat day and asked some of my closest friends for a question. Can you give me a question you think I should be asking myself on my retreat day, taken on my 40th birthday? And so I went away with 7 or 8 questions. And I thought I was going to come out of my retreat day with kind of like very clear, I was going to achieve this and do that and earn this and have. And do you know what? I came out at the end of the retreat day with a sense that what God most wants for me is to be a man of peace. To be at peace with him, to be at peace with others, and to have such a peace that other people feel drawn to me and therefore feel drawn to him. And, I love building things. I love having an impact. I want to help 10,000 people write and publish their books. I want Neighbour to be operating in 50 countries, working with hundreds of thousands of church, impacting millions of lives. You name my business, my venture, my non-profit, and I can give you figures around it. But actually, for me, the most important thing is to be a man of peace, to have a tranquility that only God can give. And some days, I'm working and running so hard that I lose that peace, or I snap at somebody, or I just am a bit short or a bit grumpy. And I know that's a sign, Matt, dab the brakes, change gear. Doesn't matter how important what you think you're doing is, nothing should result in you losing your peace and losing your peace with other people. So it's just a personal thing. But you may be listening to this and thinking, actually, I get grumpy, I lose it. When you do, don't beat yourself up about it. Just dab the brakes, change the gear. God just wants you to find a little bit of space to find your inner peace. And remember what the most important things are in life.
Well, thank you for that, Matt. We go to the last 2 questions.
Okay.
What would be your recommendation for a young entrepreneur that will maybe they are in the early 20s, 30s? They start something. They are from Romania and they start something right now.
You mean some beyond going on Amazon now and buying The Great Entrepreneur? Something you want? Other advice
after the second step.
The second step. Okay.
This one was clear. What would be your encouragement, or what would be your advice, or what would you have liked to know when you started?
I want you to know that anything is possible, and the most important thing you can do is work on your mindset. Somebody graduated from my writing my book course recently, and they said to me, Matt, I never thought I would write a book, let alone write a book in 100 days, and I have. Now I'm asking myself, what else have I told myself I cannot do that I actually can? So it doesn't matter who you are, we all have self-limiting beliefs. And I want to encourage you that with God, anything is possible. God can create something out of nothing. He can take your little and he can make a lot out of it. So I want to encourage you to throw off any sense of poverty mindset, any sense that you can't do something, that somebody else is winning, therefore you're going to lose, any sense that faith and business is not compatible. If you start off defeated, guess what? You're going to lose. Work on your mindset. Believe anything is possible. Believe that God creates something out of nothing. There is more than enough resources in the world for everybody to win. And when you win, make sure that you don't just win for yourself, but you win for everybody. You win for your clients, you win for your colleagues, you win for your nation, so that everybody benefits from your win. Yeah, buy a second home. Yeah, buy this, buy that. But the Bible tells us we're blessed not to be blessed. We're blessed to be a blessing. So just remember, as you begin to flourish and thrive, enjoy it. I love it. I enjoy when things do well. I don't know about you, Ruben, but actually, I always remember that this blessing is there, so I can be a blessing to other people. Because meaning in life isn't found by what you get. Meaning in life is found by what you give. And yeah, I get the privilege to meet people in incredible places of resourcefulness, and sometimes they have no meaning in life. But when you discover that actually it isn't about what you get, but it's about what you give, which is what Jesus said, wasn't it? You know, whoever wants to follow me, pick up your cross every day. You know, find meaning and purpose in giving, not in getting alone.
Matt, I feel pretty encouraged. I think I could start again now.
Second podcast, here we go.
We go to the last question. I'm very curious if you could share with us what you have learned about God in this season of your life.
What have I learned about God? That God is bigger than I thought he was. That many of the things that I believed about him actually are human beliefs rather than divine beliefs. We add a lot of religious and cultural clutter, things that we think are in the Bible and not in the Bible. I sat with a friend yesterday and said, but the Bible says, and I said, actually it doesn't. This is actually what the Bible says. And I talk about what I call the Bible and the Christian playbook. You know, in a business, you write an operations manual, don't you, or a playbook. And, you know, there is the Bible and there's a Christian playbook. And we have to remember that everything that's in the Christian playbook is not in the Bible. And we have to understand that actually at the core of all Jesus asked us to be and do, when he was asked what's most important, he said to love God and love your neighbour as you love yourself. Those things I will die on. Many of the other things that we make big things in the life of the church, we're not meant to die over. We should not be expending time, energy and resources. We shouldn't be on those things. We should not be washing our dirty linen around those things in public. We should not allow those things to divide us and separate us. If we love God and love our neighbour as we love ourselves, these are the most important things. So get perspective. Remember what is at the heart of the Bible. And remember that most of what's in the Christian playbook is actually not in the Bible.
Matt, thank you so much for sharing with us today. I really appreciate your investment, your time, your experience, your wisdom coming here in Romania and being encouragement for the young entrepreneurs, for the entrepreneurs with experience, for everybody that wants to find meaning in their life and in what they do. And I really appreciate all your time and your investment to be here. For us, it's an encouragement. And we hope we'll see you again.
Yeah. And can I just say, if anybody's listening and you want to connect with me, go to my little website, coffeewithmatt.com, and you can hook into me there on any of the stuff I've touched on today. I'd love to connect with you.
That's so nice, Matt. It's having a coffee with you. It's always nice. So.
Coffee with Matt.
Coffee with Matt. So thank you so much, Matt, and may God bless you and be with you in all your enterprises and everything that you do. And hope to see you again in Romania sometime.
Thank you.